Clearly, the White House views Kamala as more problematic than Mr. Biden's age, which puts his campaign in a difficult position on day one. Cyrus Garrett is here, former Southern States Director for the Biden 2020 campaign. We're certain that what we said was factual. I'll go one more. Did I say anything that was unfair?
I mean, it's not unfair, right? The performance out of the gate has been inconsistent because it's also been a very difficult terrain. She was given the border to start with, the right wing.
You think that was intentional, sort of,
I think really... it was one of those things where the border was a real issue, but yet was boiling up and not something that I think the White House had to prioritize because they had a number of bills that they had to get moving on because the country was in the lurch, right, after COVID, so during COVID. And so I think what they did was they gave the VP a very strong and solid job to take on, and it was a mess, right? When I was doing the border back in the early Obama days, it was a mess. It's a mess over every president that we have. And so to saddle her with that as our very beginning, as she's getting her team under her, was a little unfair. However, since then, I've seen her adapt, learn, and grow. And that's what I think the White House is seeing, is that she has the ability to step into these roles. I think we all saw in Tennessee something that was off script and impromptu that showed us a glimpse of who is the...
No, that was an impressive performance when she went down, day of trip, basically planned to go down to Tennessee. We can argue about the politics either way, but from her perspective and from the White House perspective, it made a lot of sense to go meet with the Tennessee Three. But that still hasn't changed America's view of her. 35% approval rating. It's abysmal. Why? And I ask this question genuinely from the White House's perspective. Michelle Obama is universally loved. I think second only to probably Gandhi right now in polls. Maybe even to Queen Elizabeth, I think she comes in number 2, and that's about it. Is extraordinarily popular with white suburban women, where Kamala Harris is not. Why not change horses here?
Because there's no way Michelle Obama is getting into politics.
Okay.
That's one. But two, the VP brought a coalition along. And I think we forget in those days after Biden won, the idea that there was still an unsettled presence in the Democratic Party. People felt let down. There was people of color that ran, not a lot of support, not a lot of galvanization behind them, and they wanted to see somebody of the future on the ticket, right? The future Democratic Party represented. She was put up as that representative, and she brought along that coalition then. I still think she has a strong base among the Democratic Party. I just feel like she has to be out there more championing the issues that the base cares about, especially to young people. I think there's a lot of room for this administration to grow with young people. I think they're the ones that saved us in 22 because they saw a fight that was against democracy versus something they didn't recognize. And I think they'll see that again, but it's better if the administration provides them a reason to vote instead of something to vote against.
To that point, this is from Politico, hardly a conservative news organization. Biden's campaign launch is immediately overshadowed by other events, and his team loves it. You have experience with this. You ran against somebody who ran a safe campaign. You were part of the Obama 08 coalition, which seemed to be, now in retrospect, hey, that of course he was going to win. Nobody thought that when he went up against Hillary Clinton in 2008. How much of a risk to President Biden's reelection is there in running this very, very safe campaign where, hey, if things are overshadowed, we're just fine?
So it does run a risk because you seem out of control if things go badly, right? We all don't know where the economy will be in the next 6 months, and because we don't, be seen behind that economy, to see not doing enough to prop up the economy is all a risk that the White House is going to run if the president isn't seen out there on job number 1. However, I do think that this White House has shown that it can prioritize getting the job done of governing, as well as making sure that it's getting its message out about the priorities that it shares with the American people. And I think that's what this election is going to be about. They're going to frame this as, are you better with Biden, or are you better with the alternative? And I think right now, as we look at the other side, it's hard to see an alternative.
Well, and they're trying to sort of turn any alternative right now into Donald Trump.
Well, I mean, the problem with the party right now is they can't get out of its shadow. And my thing is, like, as much as I'm agnostic, I'm one of those people that I will face whoever you give me. However, the party itself is giving us a lot of cues that they cannot get out of their own way, right?
You're saying the Republicans. All right, fair enough. Yeah, no, look, hey, I got Republican friends who say to me all the time, the problem is Republicans are stupid. So and Democrats don't mind that. We got to run.
Thank you.
This is great. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.